What if an entire town watched its own people disappear and decided to say nothing? What if the roads leading out of a place existed only on maps but never actually took anyone anywhere? What if the last thing 47 people ever saw was the same narrow stretch of trees at the edge of a town called Harlow Creek? And what if every single one of those disappearances happened during the same week of the same month, year after year, without a single explanation that held up under investigation? Those questions are not hypothetical. They are the foundation of what you are about to hear. Harlow Creek is a small rural town nestled in the dense woodlands of northern rural America, population just under 900 people. It does not appear prominently on any tourist map. There is no Chamber of Commerce website. The local newspaper stopped printing in 2009. On paper, it is just another forgotten town, slowly fading in a forgotten county. But between investigative journalist Dana Farrell, two retired county detectives, and a collection of suppressed public records obtained through a Freedom of Information request filed in 2021, a pattern emerged that cannot be explained away by coincidence or poor record-keeping. Since 1989, at least one person has vanished from Harlow Creek during the last week of October. Not gone missing temporarily, not run away and been found later. Gone, permanently, no trace, no body, no goodbye. In some years, it was one person. In 1997, it was 6. In 2011, it was 9. The total count as of the most recent confirmed case in October 2023 stands at 47 individuals. What makes this different from ordinary missing persons cases is what the records show was done about it, or rather, what was not done. Police reports were filed and then closed within 72 hours. Families who pushed for investigations were quietly redirected, and in at least 11 documented cases, the names of the missing were removed from county records entirely within 3 months of their disappearance. The town did not just lose people, it erased them, and nobody outside of Harlow Creek seemed to notice until one woman decided she was not going to let her brother be erased too. If this story is already making you question everything, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Lost Beyond Sight so you never miss what we uncover next, and drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is only the beginning. Her name is Margot Eisen. She is 41 years old, works as a school librarian, and describes herself as someone who has never once believed in the supernatural. When her younger brother, Callum, disappeared from Harlow Creek on October 28, 2021, she did not immediately suspect anything unusual. He had moved there 2 years earlier for work, renting a small house on the eastern edge of town near the tree line. He was 34, healthy, employed, and by every account, happy. Then one morning, he simply was not there anymore. Margot drove to Harlow Creek the day after his landlord reported him absent. What she found was not grief or urgency, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful, it feels practiced. The sheriff's office told her Callum had probably gone on a personal trip. His truck was still parked outside his house. His phone was on his kitchen counter. His coffee mug still had coffee in it, cold but not yet molded. Nobody at the sheriff's office seemed to think these details were worth noting. She stayed in town for 11 days. During that time, 3 separate neighbors told her, in low voices and only when they were certain no one else was listening, that this had happened before, that it always happened at the end of October, that you did not ask too many questions. One older woman named Ruth Pritchard, who has since moved out of Harlow Creek entirely, told Margot something that stopped her completely. Ruth said, and this is a direct account from Margot's own recorded statement, that the people who disappear are not random, they are chosen, and that the choosing happens weeks before anyone vanishes. Margot asked Ruth what she meant by chosen. Ruth looked toward the window, then back at Margot, and said that in the days before the last week of October, certain people in town start acting differently. They become withdrawn. They sleep at odd hours. They stop eating regular meals. They begin walking to the tree line alone at dusk and standing there without moving for long periods of time. Ruth said she had seen it happen 7 times in her 40 years in Harlow Creek, and she said that every single person she had ever seen standing at that tree line in that way was gone within the week. Margot Eisen contacted Dana Farrell in early 2022. Farrell, a journalist who had previously investigated 2 separate institutional cover-ups in rural county governments, spent 4 months cross-referencing public records, census data, and missing persons filings across 3 adjacent counties before confirming what Margot had already suspected. The disappearances in Harlow Creek had been systematically underreported. In many cases, missing persons files had been closed with notations that read voluntary departure or unverified relocation, despite no forwarding address, no financial activity, and no contact with any known family member ever again. Farrell also uncovered something else entirely, a pattern in the geography. Every confirmed disappearance in the documented record originated from within a half-mile radius of the eastern tree line, the same dense stretch of old-growth woodland that borders the town on its eastern edge. No disappearances had ever been recorded from the western side of town, or the residential center, or anywhere near the main road. Every single one of 47 people last known locations placed them in proximity to those trees. In the summer of 2022, Farrell hired a geographic survey team to map the tree line. What they found was not what any of them expected. Beneath the forest floor, at a depth of roughly 4 to 6 feet across a stretch of approximately 300 meters, the survey equipment registered a series of hollow subsurface chambers. Natural formations, the geologist on the team initially said, possibly old sinkholes or collapsed underground water channels. But the arrangement was not random. The chambers formed a rough linear pattern running parallel to the tree line, almost perfectly evenly spaced. 1 chamber every 19 meters, 16 chambers total. The geologist returned 3 weeks later with additional equipment and a second opinion from a colleague. Their revised assessment was more careful. They said the chambers could be natural, but the regularity of the spacing was statistically unusual for natural formations. They could not rule out that the subsurface structures had been modified or that the soil compression patterns suggested periodic disturbance. Periodic meaning recurring, recurring meaning not a one-time event. Something beneath that forest floor had been disturbed again and again over a very long period of time. Nobody was prepared for what the ground sample analysis revealed next. The soil extracted from the chambers contained something the lab technicians at first assumed was contamination. Traces of human bone fragment, extremely degraded, consistent with long-term underground exposure. Not 1 sample, 11 of the 16 chambers tested positive for human biological material. The fragments were too deteriorated for DNA identification in most cases, but 3 samples yielded enough genetic material for partial profiling. 2 of those 3 partial profiles were cross-referenced against the missing persons DNA database maintained by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Persons. 1 profile returned a match, a partial match to a man named Gerald Haas, who had been reported missing from Harlow Creek in October 2003. He was 52 years old at the time of his disappearance. His wife had filed a report, pushed for investigation, and eventually moved away after being told repeatedly by local authorities that her husband had left voluntarily. She had been living in a different state for 15 years when Farrell contacted her. She had never stopped believing something had happened to him in those trees. When Farrell brought the evidence to county authorities, the response was not what she anticipated. There was no urgency, no immediate investigation order. The county sheriff's office issued a statement saying the findings required further contextual evaluation before any determination could be made. That statement was issued on September 14, 2022. As of the filing of this account, no follow-up investigation has been formally opened. The chambers have not been excavated. The other 10 biological samples remain unidentified. And then October 2022 arrived. Farrell, who had been staying in a rented room on the west side of Harlow Creek while working on her investigation, began keeping a daily record. She noted the date, the weather, interactions with residents, and anything she observed near the tree line. Her notes for the first 3 weeks of October describe a town that feels like any other quiet rural place. Cold evenings, wood smoke, children at the small school, ordinary life. Then on October 19th, 9 days before the end of the month, she wrote just 4 words in her journal. Something has already started. Farrell's October journal, which she later shared in full with Margot Eisen and which forms a primary source document in this investigation, describes what she observed beginning on October 19th with a clarity that is deeply unsettling precisely because of how measured and unemotional her writing is. She was not trying to frighten anyone. She was documenting what she saw. On October 19th, she noticed a man she had seen regularly at the town's only diner stop coming in for his usual morning coffee. A woman who worked at the small grocery stopped making eye contact with anyone in the store. By October 21st, Farrell had identified at least 4 residents who had visibly changed their behavior within days. They moved slowly. They spoke less. When spoken to, their responses were coherent but brief, as though maintaining the conversation required effort they were reluctant to spend. On the evening of October 23rd, Farrell drove to the eastern edge of town just before dusk. She parked on the road that runs closest to the tree line and watched. Within 30 minutes, she counted 3 separate individuals walking slowly from different directions toward the trees. They did not speak to each other. They did not acknowledge each other's presence. They simply stood at the edge of the forest, facing inward in complete stillness until the light was fully gone and she could no longer see them. She did not get out of the car. She went back the following night, then the next. Each evening, different people. Some she recognized, some she did not. On October 26th, she returned to find the area completely empty. No one at the tree line, no movement. That night, she received a knock at the door of her rented room at 11 o'clock. She opened it. No one was there, but on the doorstep, there was a single item, a coffee mug, the same model, color, and visible crack along the handle as the one she had seen sitting cold on Callum Eisen's kitchen counter the day she first arrived in Harlow Creek to look for Margot's brother. She had not touched that mug. She had not taken it. And Callum's house had been locked and emptied by the landlord months before she arrived. If you are watching this right now and you want to understand why we kept investigating after that, consider sharing this video and leaving your theory in the comments below. Subscribe to Lost Beyond Sight, because what comes next in this investigation is something no one who has heard it has been able to explain away. On October 28, 2022, 3 people were reported missing from Harlow Creek. All 3 had been observed standing at the tree line in the days prior. All 3 had displayed the same behavioral changes Farrell had documented. All 3 vanished without any sign of a struggle, without leaving behind any indication of voluntary departure, and without any trace of movement beyond the edge of the forest. The sheriff's office closed all 3 cases within 60 hours. Farrell left Harlow Creek on October 30th. She has not returned. In the months that followed, she worked with Margot Eisen and a civil liberties attorney to petition for a formal state-level investigation into the pattern of disappearances and the handling of evidence. That petition was accepted for review in March 2023 and has remained in review status ever since. The ground beneath the tree line has not been excavated. The 16 chambers remain untouched. In October 2023, 2 more people vanished. This has now happened 35 consecutive years in a row. Different people, same week, same location, same silence from local authorities. And here is the detail that Farrell says she cannot stop thinking about, the one that changed the way she understood everything she had documented. When she reviewed the behavioral patterns she had recorded across multiple years of compiled witness accounts, she noticed something. The people who changed in the weeks before the disappearances, the ones who stopped eating, stopped speaking, began walking to the trees at dusk, none of them ever seemed frightened. Witnesses consistently described them as calm, almost peaceful, as though they were not being taken somewhere against their will, but returning somewhere they had always been going. Nobody knows what is beneath those trees in Harlow Creek. Nobody knows what draws people to the forest's edge in the final days of October, year after year, with that quiet and unresisting look on their faces. Nobody knows what happened to 47 people, or whether the chambers beneath the soil hold answers that are still waiting to be found, or whether some of those answers have already been buried far deeper than any survey equipment can reach. But here is the question that nobody involved in this investigation has been able to answer, and perhaps you can. If the people who disappear are not afraid when they go, does that make what is happening to them better, or does it make it so much worse?